Welcome to another deep dive. This time, it's into Grace Under Stormy Skies, a story you all shared with us.
It's great to be back, and this story is a fascinating one for sure.
We have Willow Creek, a fictional town a lot like so many real ones,
Yeah, definitely. And Grace, this young wife and mother,
whose life is about to change in some pretty big ways.
yeah, the story jumps right into the storm.
Yeah, like no messing around.
Like, the author wanted us to feel how sudden it all is.
Exactly. 1 minute, it's birds, chirping kids, playing like
Totally peaceful, and then bam.
disaster strikes.
Literally, the world is falling apart around Grace.
It's a powerful way to start the story.
It really is, and I think it reminds us.
That these things can happen to anyone, anywhere.
Oh, absolutely. You never know when a storm might hit.
And you really feel that sense of fear.
When you read about Grace fighting to keep her family safe,
It's like you're right there with her.
the story does a great job of putting you right in that moment.
It's not just about the physical damage either.
Yeah, the story goes deeper than that.
It gets into the emotional impact.
We see Grace's terror as the storm rages on.
And I think that's what makes her resilience so remarkable.
Yeah, I mean, after all that loss,
Her home, her possessions, everything's gone.
and yet she still finds a way to move forward.
It's inspiring, isn't it?
Absolutely. I'd even say the storm almost gives her a new purpose.
Oh, that's interesting. Tell me more about that.
Well, think about it. After everything, she takes a job at the local cafe.
Right. Just a simple job, but
But the story says she pours her heart into every cup of coffee.
I love that detail. It's
Even in chaos, we can find meaning in the smallest things.
like helping others brings a sense of normalcy.
Exactly. And there's actually research on this.
Oh, really?
Yeah, studies show that helping others after trauma can be really powerful.
Makes sense. I guess it takes your mind off your own troubles.
It's more than that, actually. It gives you back a sense of control.
Oh, I see.
It can be a step towards healing and growth.
That's so hopeful.
It really is. And it makes you think, even after something awful like this storm.
There's still potential for positive change.
Now, let's talk about how the community responds to this tragedy.
Okay, so we often hear about the power of community.
But this story shows what that actually means.
It goes beyond just donating stuff or helping rebuild.
Right. It's the emotional support, the shared meals, just listening to each other.
And it's not just one-sided, right?
Definitely not. Grace is getting support, but she's also giving back.
By showing up, working at the cafe, being part of the community.
Exactly. It's like a cycle of support.
So true, and I think that requires a lot of trust.
Absolutely. The kind of trust that maybe only comes.
After going through something like this together,
You're right. The storm forced people to see each other differently.
to realize they're all vulnerable.
And in that vulnerability, they found a deeper connection.
So the storm actually brought them closer.
In a way, yeah, it's kind of paradoxical, isn't it?
It is, and it reminds me of something I read
Oh, yeah.
about how after a crisis, there's this window of opportunity.
For change. Exactly.
Yeah.
Communities are more open to collaborating.
And they're more aware of the need to work together.
It's a chance to rebuild, but also to build back better.
That's a powerful idea.
It is, and it brings us to Grace and her family finally going back home.
Back to their rebuilt house.
What do you think about that moment in the story?
It's interesting because it's like a return to normalcy.
Right. But it can't erase everything they went through.
Stepping back into that house must have brought up so many emotions.
Oh, I bet relief, but maybe some anxiety too.
Like a reminder of the trauma.
It makes you think about the weight of memory.
How even a rebuilt home can still hold on to the past.
You wonder, did things trigger those memories for Grace?
Like, did the floorboards creaking sound like the storm all over again?
You've hit on a crucial point. Rebuilding is about so much more than just construction.
Yeah, it's about rebuilding lives and spirits.
Let's explore how Grace's journey reflects the stages of healing after trauma.
Okay. Yeah, for me, that's where the story goes beyond just a heartwarming tale.
It becomes a real study of the human spirit.
Because, like you said, rebuilding isn't just about bricks and mortar.
It's about mending the emotional landscape, too.
And the story shows us this through Grace's actions.
Right, like how she involves her daughter Lily in the rebuilding.
It's not just practical. It's about giving Lily a sense of agency.
Exactly, allowing her to be part of reclaiming their home.
And reclaiming their sense of safety, too.
Right, it's like Grace instinctively understands that Lily needs to be involved in the healing.
Not shielded from it.
You got it. And this ties into a concept called collective efficacy.
Collective efficacy.
Yeah, it's the belief that a group can come together and achieve goals.
So by involving Lily Grace is strengthening their family's belief in themselves.
Exactly. They can overcome this together.
It reminds me of something I read about storytelling after trauma.
Oh, yeah.
Sharing experiences can help people process what happened.
Absolutely. It helps them find meaning in the chaos. Storytelling is crucial for community recovery.
It creates a shared narrative, a
Mm.
way to connect and realize they're not alone.
So as Grace and her neighbors rebuilt their homes,
They're also creating a new story for Willow Creek.
one that acknowledges the devastation, but also highlights the resilience.
And that brings us to another key point, celebrating small victories.
Yes, the story shows the long and difficult process of rebuilding,
There are setbacks for sure.
but there's also joy in those milestones.
Like when the roof goes up or the first meal in the new kitchen.
Each small victory is like a sign of their strength.
A testament to their spirit.
Couldn't have said it better myself, and it's important to remember,
That community support isn't always easy to find or give.
especially when everyone's dealing with their own losses.
Right? Resources might be, limited, tensions can run high.
The story hints at that complexity.
Yeah, it reminds us that community resilience isn't always perfect.
It's about acknowledging those struggles and navigating them together.
So how does Grace's journey reflect that understanding?
Well, she doesn't try to become some big leader or anything.
Right.
Her strength is in her everyday actions, her commitment to her family.
And her kindness within the community.
It's a different kind of heroism, isn't it?
It is. It's a reminder that resilience isn't always loud and obvious.
It can be found in those quiet moments of perseverance.
Yeah, and I think we can all relate to that in our own lives.
Absolutely. We all face challenges that test our strength.
And it's comforting to know that resilience can be found in those small acts of hope.
Exactly. And often those quiet moments are where real growth happens.
It's like that saying about a seed needing darkness to grow.
Yeah, we often discover our strength in the darkness of our challenges.
That's a beautiful way to put it, and it makes me think about the storm's silver lining.
Right. What are some ways this experience might have changed Grace and Willow Creek for the better?
Well, it definitely forced them to rely on each other.
Yeah, and that probably deepened their bonds, made them more empathetic.
It's amazing how adversity can sometimes lead to positive change.
It shakes things up, makes
Yeah.
people reevaluate their priorities,
Like the storm cleared away the unimportant stuff.
and revealed what truly matters: human connection.
And it's on that foundation that they rebuilt their lives.
Their homes, their community, their sense of purpose.
And that brings us to the end of the story.
With Grace and her family back in their home,
It feels like a moment of closure, but also a new beginning.
I agree there's a sense of hope and possibility.
They weathered the storm and came out stronger.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Grace under stormy skies,
What are some key takeaways you hope listeners will remember?
well, first, resilience is a journey, not a destination.
It's about showing up every day and choosing hope.
And we don't have to go through tough times alone.
Community support is so important.
And lastly, even the worst storms can have silver linings.
They can bring us closer together, reveal our strength, and help us appreciate life more.
That's beautifully said.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Grace Under Stormy Skies.
It's always a pleasure.
May Grace's story remind you that you too have the strength to rebuild and heal.
And to come out stronger on the other side.
Thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone. Yeah, it's a return to normalcy, but it's not like the storm never happened.
Right, like stepping back into that house.
Must have been so emotional.
Yeah, a mix of relief, but also probably some anxiety.
Like echoes of what they went through.
It makes you think about memory, you know?
How even a rebuilt place can still hold on to the past.
I wonder if things triggered those memories for Grace.
Oh, for sure. Like maybe the sound of the floorboards creaking.
Reminded her of the wind howling during the storm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You've hit on something important.
What's that?
Rebuilding isn't just about the physical stuff.
Right, it's about rebuilding lives, too.
It's about healing from trauma.
Yeah, and for me, that's what makes this story so powerful.
It goes beyond just a feel-good story.
It becomes a study of how people cope with difficult things.
And the story shows us this through Grace's actions.
Like how she gets her daughter Lily involved in the rebuilding.
Right. It's not just about having an extra pair of hands.
It's about giving Lily a sense of control.
Exactly. It lets her be part of reclaiming their home.
And reclaiming their sense of security, too.
It's like Grace understands that Lily needs to be involved in the healing process.
Not shielded from it.
You got it. And this ties into a concept called collective efficacy.
Collective efficacy? Okay.
It's the belief that a group can come together and achieve things.
So by involving Lily,
Grace is strengthening their family's belief that they can overcome this.
they can do it together.
Exactly. And it reminds me of something else.
What's that?
The importance of storytelling after trauma.
Oh yeah, I've read about that.
Sharing your experiences, even the hard ones.
Can help you process what happened.
Yeah. And find meaning in it all.
It's like creating a shared narrative.
Exactly. So as Grace and her neighbors rebuild their homes,
They're also rebuilding their sense of community.
they're creating a new story for Willow Creek.
One that acknowledges the bad stuff, but also focuses on their resilience.
Exactly. And that brings us to another important point.
What's that?
Celebrating the small victories along the way.
Oh, yeah, like those little milestones.
The story doesn't shy away from how hard rebuilding is.
Right. It takes time, and there are setbacks.
But there's also joy in those small wins.
Like when the roof is finally finished.
Or having the first meal in the new kitchen.
Those little moments are so important.
They show how far they've come.
And they remind us that even in tough times,
There's still room for happiness.
and it's important to remember that community support,
Isn't always easy,
especially when everyone is dealing with their own losses.
right? Resources might be limited. People might get
Its
frustrated.
story shows that side of things too.
It's a reminder that community resilience isn't always perfect.
It's about working through those challenges together.
So how do we see that in Grace's journey?
Well, she's not trying to be some big leader or anything.
Right.
Her strength is in her everyday actions.
Taking care of her family, being kind to her neighbors.
It's a quiet kind of strength.
And I think that's something we can all learn from.
Yeah, like we might not face a literal storm,
But we all have challenges in our lives.
and it's comforting to know that resilience can be found in those small moments.
In those everyday acts of hope,
And sometimes those quiet moments are where the biggest growth happens.
like a seed needing darkness to grow.
It's a beautiful analogy.
It is, and it makes me think about all the positive changes that came from this storm.
What do you mean?
Well, it forced Grace and her community to rely on each other.
Right, and that probably brought them closer.
It's amazing how something bad can actually lead to good things.
Like the storm cleared away all the superficial stuff,
And what was left was genuine human connection.
and that's what they used to rebuild their lives.
Their homes, their community, their sense of purpose.
And that brings us to the end of the story.
With Grace and her family back in their rebuilt home.
It feels like a happy ending, but also a new beginning.
I agree, there's a sense of hope and possibility for the future.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Grace under stormy skies,
What are some things you hope listeners will take away from this story?
well, first, I think it's important to remember that resilience is a journey.
Not a destination.
It's about showing up every day and choosing hope, even when things are tough.
And remembering that we don't have to go through it alone.
Community support is so crucial.
It is. And lastly, I think this story reminds us
That even the worst storms can have silver linings.
they can bring us closer together and help us appreciate the good things in life.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Grace under stormy skies.
It was my pleasure.
And remember, you have the strength to overcome any challenge.
And to build a brighter future for yourself and your community.
Thanks for listening, everyone. It's interesting how she doesn't become some kind of like a big leader or anything.
Yeah, like she's not rallying the town with speeches or something.
Right, exactly. Her strength is much quieter,
It's in those everyday actions, how she takes care of her family.
and her little acts of kindness in the community.
Yeah, it's a different way of being strong, isn't it?
It is. It's like resilience doesn't always have to be this big dramatic thing.
It can be found in the small things too.
Like just getting up every day and putting one foot in front of the other.
And choosing hope, even when things are tough.
Yeah, I think that's something we can all relate to.
Absolutely, we all face challenges in our lives.
And it's good to remember that strength can be found in those small moments.
And those quiet acts of perseverance.
And sometimes those quiet moments are where the real growth happens.
It's like that analogy of a seed needing darkness to grow.
Yeah, it's beautiful, isn't it?
It reminds us that we often discover our strength in the midst of our struggles.
So going back to the storm silver lining,
Right.
what are some ways this experience might have actually changed Grace and Willow Creek for the better?
Well, for one, it forced them to depend on each other.
Right, to ask for help and to offer help.
And that probably created stronger bonds between them.
I think that's true. It's like the storm stripped away some of those barriers people put up.
Yeah. And what was left was a deeper sense of community.
And that's what they used to rebuild, not just their homes, but their lives.
And there's a sense of purpose, too.
And that brings us to the end of the story.
Back to that moment of Grace and her family finally settling back into their home.
It feels like a happy ending, but it also feels like a new beginning.
Definitely, there's a sense of hope and possibility for the future.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Grace under stormy skies,
What are some key takeaways you hope listeners will walk away with?
well, I think the biggest one is that resilience is a journey.
not a destination.
It's something we practice every day.
In those big moments and in those small, quiet moments.
And we don't have to do it alone.
Community support is so important.
It really is, and I also think the story shows us
That even the worst storms can bring about positive change.
they can make us stronger and help us appreciate what really matters.
Beautifully said.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Grace Under Stormy Skies.
It's been a pleasure.
And remember, you have the strength to weather any storm life throws your way.
You got this.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
See you next time.